The Miami Dolphins 2023 Spotlight Series continues with Syracuse offensive tackle Matthew Bergeron, who he is, how he would fit the Dolphins, and where they might be able to land him to add him to the roster for 2023 and beyond.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Dolphins fans? It is Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins, and it is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. It is Tuesday, April 4th, 2023. Surprise! We got another show today. We are double dipping here on a Tuesday because we are pedal to the metal ahead of the 2023 NFL Draft to get you ready for all of the prospects that are viable candidates for the Dolphins to draft with their two selections on day 2 of the 2023 NFL Draft. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Dolphins your first and second listen of the day here on this April 4th episode of the show. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, decade-long draftnik, former director of scouting and co-founder of Draft Network, now currently host of Locked On Dolphins and host of the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast with the Draft Dudes, myself and Joe Marino talking about NFL team building. And boy, oh boy, was this a double-edged sword, I think is probably the best way to put it. Because I have watched Syracuse offensive tackle Matthew Bergeron, the subject of today's discussion. And this is a fascinating player for the Dolphins. Had a chance to see him up and close and in person at the 2023 Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama, one of the big winners of that week. Now I had a chance to dive deep into the tape, Notre Dame, Clemson, a couple other games, and get a look at him against some really quality competition. But also, the reason why it's a double-edged sword is because this Syracuse offense was, to me, what the Iowa offense was to me when watching Sam Laporta. Rough. I had a chance to kind of advance scout a little bit for Sean Tucker, the running back out of Syracuse, and we'll give him his own day in the sun here on one of these 2023 Miami Dolphins prospect spotlights as well. But now is the time to talk about Matthew Bergeron. So let's start with who he is before we transition to how he would fit the Dolphins roster, and then finish with where they need to draft this player. So Matthew Bergeron has an incomplete athletic profile. He did not run a 40-yard dash, and that's okay. We have some size measurements for him. Between his pro day and the NFL Combine, we have his lower body explosive numbers with his jumps and his shuttle scores, which are his agility scores. And then we obviously have biographical information and the film, which is the most important part of any player evaluation. So let's start with who Matthew Bergeron is based off the information that we received through his pre-draft process. Matthew Bergeron checked in Indianapolis at 6'0", so 6'4" and 7/8, just short of 6'5". He was 318 pounds, had 33 3/4 inch arms, had 9.5 inch hands, and jumped 30.5 inches in the vertical jump and 103 inches in the standing broad jump. I'm not a math guy, but I can tell you that is 8 foot 7 inches. At his pro day, he also checked in at 6'5", right around 6'5", still at 318 pounds. The wingspan, the arm length, all that stayed the same. His pro day was on March 20th, a couple weeks ago, and he added a 7.38 second three-cone drill and a 4.66 second short shuttle. What do these numbers mean? I'm glad that you asked. Before we talk about who he is on the field, what his strengths are, and his playing experience, his weight at 318 is 66th percentile. He is on the shorter side for tackles, 17th percentile for offensive tackles to pass through the combine since 2020. But that arm length is over your 30, it's nearly 34s. That certainly passes the threshold for playing offensive tackle in the NFL. Generally perceived, some teams have a cutoff of 33 inches, other teams have a cutoff of 32 inches. He'll be fine. 78th percentile in the vertical jump. 52nd percentile in a standing broad jump. So he's above average in both athletic tests from lower body explosiveness at 318 pounds. From an agility standpoint, that 7.38 in the three-cone drill, that's good for a 90th percentile test amongst offensive tackles. Now, that did not take place at the NFL Combine. It took place at his pro day, but nevertheless, it's a data point. That's a highly impressive score. And then his 4.66 second short shuttle is good for 66th percentile. So this is an above-average athlete at an above-average weight that has below-average physical stature from a height perspective, which gives him, in some ways, a unique advantage for the fact that he has leverage and can play with leverage and get under the pads of defensive linemen, which we'll talk about how he does that and how well he achieves that here in just a few minutes. Bergeron is originally from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. He was the number 2 recruit from Canada when he came out of high school. He was born on February 26th, 2000, so he's 23 years old. He will be 23 throughout the entirety of his rookie season, and he has been a starter since 2019. 2019, he played in all 12 games. He started 5 at right tackle. Right tackle. 2020 started all 11 games, started the first 3 games of the year at right tackle, then flipped to left tackle for the last 8 games of the season. Started all 12 games in 2021 at left tackle, and then started every game this past year as well, with the exception of the bowl game, which he elected to opt out of to get ready for his pre-draft process at left tackle. So he's got about 1 season's worth of starts at right tackle, and he's got 2 seasons worth of starts at left tackle. 2.5 seasons worth of starts at left tackle. 39 starts in total, all at offensive tackle. But he got work in Mobile at guard. And there's some who feel like his ceiling as a player might be best suited to play guard at the NFL level. I can tell you Lance Zierlein, who I have a ton of respect for, have met Lance a number of times. I think he's incredibly smart. He's the son of an NFL offensive line coach. His comparison for Matthew Bergeron was Joel Bitonio. I saw, when I watched him play on tape, Matthew Bergeron, and he doesn't quite meet the athletic thresholds of being this player, but I saw some parallels to Rashawn Slater at Northwestern. Now, Bergeron is bigger, and he's not as dynamic as Rashawn Slater, but it's the same frame, squatty frame, super dense build, super light on his feet, very fluid, always under control. I'm watching Matthew Bergeron against Notre Dame work off of what is attempted to be a double team before climbing to a stack linebacker. And his guard puts the defensive tackle in the ground. And Bergeron, in real time, jumps over the body on the A level of the line of scrimmage, and simultaneously, as his feet hits the ground, gets attached to and secures the second level block. Some really tremendous functional athleticism illustrated by Matthew Bergeron, and I think that's the number one thing that pops to me when I watch Matthew Bergeron. We're going to talk a little bit more about who this player can be for the Dolphins after. Remind you guys about Built March Madness. The March Madness bracket with Built Bar is here. Everybody has a favorite bar or puff. We are in the finals, which means we are closing down on declaring our champion for the Built March Madness bracket. Every time that you vote, you can vote daily, so now's the time, you get entered into a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners receive a free box of Built Bars, and 1 lucky Locked On listener out of that drawing will be given a 12-month subscription to all of Built's best bars monthly, sent directly to your front door. You have to try Built. Built is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. It's the life hack you didn't know you needed. They're high in protein, high in fiber, low in calories, low in sugar. They're absolutely positively delicious. So visit BuiltMarchMadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff and pick up a box while you're there. You can vote every day in March, so hop in and support your pick. Bergeron. There's some good news and some bad news. And we're going to start with the good news in the player evaluation for Matthew Bergeron. This player is a phenomenal fit. This player, from a movement skills, from a football intelligence, from a center of gravity and functional balance perspective, you want to play him at left guard? Great. You want to play him at right tackle? Great. Teron Armstead goes down and you need to play him at left tackle? Great. I have the utmost confidence in Matthew Bergeron's ability to fill any of those spots. And I perceive Matthew Bergeron to be I don't call him just a high floor player, because I think he can be even better at guard than what he is at tackle. But I do think he's a player who you should be drafting and have a pretty standard expectation of what it is you're going to get. This is a player who, whether you are asking him to combo block and climb, horizontal displacement in the run game, pass protect, pull, squeeze horizontally and slide protect, he can do it. And he can do so. He does so with a super consistent base of support. It's the number one thing for me that is impressive for Matthew Bergeron, is watching his base relative to some of the other high-hipped tackles that we have explored, most notably Blake Freeland. The contrast between the two is stunning, right? And there's about a 2.5 inch difference in height between the two. And Matthew Bergeron is technically a better athlete when you look at the athletic testing. But when I watch them play, Bergeron plays with control all the time. He's smooth. He never crosses his feet over. He never stops his feet dead. He's constantly playing in that sitting down on my hips, my chest is up, my knees are out, my feet are wide, and then it's just a matter of methodical feet to slide and mirror if I'm in pass protection. And if I'm involved in the run game, the fact that he's got sneaky leverage, he's got really good pop in his hands, he's got active willingness to drive his feet and push and reset the line of scrimmage, I could project Matthew Bergeron into a gap scheme, or I can project him into a zone scheme, and I have the utmost confidence in his ability to do so. I think for the Dolphins, implementing him as a competition piece, I would take him right now over both Austin and Liam. So now the question is, what spot is he best served, and what spot is your best alternative out of the other two players to play the other spot? I know we're all going to point to right tackle and say, well, that's Tua's blind side. That has to be what gets addressed. But I'd be willing to live in a world in which Matthew Bergeron is your left guard and you feel really good about everything that you have from Teron Armstead over, and then you take the winner of the battle of the other two, or a veteran player that you signed post U1, and put that player in as a starting right tackle. And if Bergeron's going to be the guard, ideally you get a vet and sign the vet. I just could not get over how smooth he is as a player. And it's not like he is... I thought Liam Eichenberg at Notre Dame was a fairly smooth player unless he was tested with vertical speed as far as pass protection standpoint goes, as a tackle, left tackle for the Irish. But since he's came to the NFL, you see a lot of overextending, a lot of lack of patience on your base that feels like it's because things are happening quickly for him. I never once watched Bergeron and said, wow, he was really overstressed by the speed of that transpiring play. Now, there is some concern with his anchor against Clemson. Miles Murphy, on one instance, really built up a speed-to-power conversion and walked him backwards. I do think that's an area that's not a huge strength. And that's the concern about playing him at tackle, in my mind, is there's a greater space. I know there's bigger bodies on the inside, but there's a greater space and more explosive athletes on the edge, in which you're asking him to play in space and isolated, where a more dynamic player might be able to convert speed to power and run through his frame, as compared to when you're inside, there's less distance, there's less area to create momentum, and in that space, I think he'd be a little less stressed. His base of support can maintain itself and be consistent, and he can really quickly get up on his blocks and short set defensive tackles, and because of his stature, I think he has enough to naturally leverage and get underneath of those bigger framed guys that would otherwise test him with their ability to charge up the field and overpower you. Because at 318 pounds, he's got the requisite amount of mass to be able to play with strength on the inside. I thought he did a really nice job on zone concepts with cutoff blocks. He is a relentless player. I'll give him that too. There's certainly an appetite for winning the point of attack and escorting guys out of the frame. The Notre Dame game was a good showcase. It spotlighted him against Isaiah Foskey. I thought he showcased a really good ability to get his hands on, really deliberate with his hands. Now, his hand accuracy is not always the best, but he does look to pin and leverage you and force you to commit to half of his frame, and then he'll use his free hand to clamp you and make sure you can't work back across his frame. If you're going to push up the outside shoulder, he's going to trap you with that inside hand and really close the door shut, where you really only, you have to finish the way you've committed to go, or you have to then press off of him and work your way through his frame to collapse him back straight to the quarterback. And top shelf guys are probably going to be able to do that to him to some degree. So I don't think this is a universal player. This isn't a freak of athlete type player that is just absolutely too good to be true. And that's what I think made Rashawn Slater so special. I know I invoked that name earlier. And I want to make sure I'm clear. I don't think this is Rashawn Slater. But the similarities in play style for me, and the way that they move and the way that they are built and the control that they have, has echoes of Rashawn Slater as what is 65th percentile athlete or 70th percentile athlete, as compared to Rashawn Slater being, well, I don't want to do him the disservice here, so yeah. Slater, 94th percentile, 84th percentile, 97th percentile, 93rd percentile, 91st percentile, 85th percentile, 94th percentile, 91st percentile. You get the point. That's like a 95th percentile athlete. He's not that, and that's why he's probably in the conversation to be available around pick 50 when the Dolphins are on the clock. So all of that's the good news. I look at the tackles that we have evaluated to this point in time, and I have done 8 of them now. I did the 2 Ohio State kids, and I guess I'm going to have to do DeJuan Jones because Todd McShay just mocked DeJuan Jones to the Dolphins at 51. So I guess we're going to have to do a DeJuan Jones, just because McShay's put that into my existence. I did the 2 Ohio State kids, Paris Johnson Jr. and DeJuan Jones. I did Northwestern's Peter Skoronski, Georgia's Broderick Jones, Oklahoma's Anton Harrison, Tennessee's Darnell Wright, BYU's Blake Freeland, and now Syracuse's Matthew Bergeron. How's he stack up against those guys? It's a great question. We're going to talk about that next here on the show. That is where we are finishing our spotlight of Matthew Bergeron, where the Dolphins would need to draft him if they wanted to add him to the roster for 2023 and beyond. Before I dive into where Bergeron goes, consider this your formal invitation to join the party on Subtext. We have opened up a Subtext community this week, which is an opportunity for you to text and talk Dolphins football directly with me. I have some resources that are set up. Once you are signed up, you can text Dolphins at 305-419-3776. 3924 to sign up for the Subtext community. Get a chance to talk directly with me, answer your questions. We can talk about breaking news together. We had a bunch of people that asked a bunch of questions via text about the Durham Smythe contract that came through yesterday, the contract extension. We've talked some about the prospects that I've been watching, give you guys a sneak peek, have a couple resources that are available to you guys. So once you guys are signed up, you can text in CAP and get my multi-year salary cap table that I've been using for the Dolphins offseason blueprint, or you could text draft and see all the grades that I've given all the players that I'm evaluating for the Dolphins, including the ones that we aren't actively discussing for here on the show. So it's a lot of fun. You get a 2-week free trial. See if it's for you. If it's not, hey, no worries. And if it is, we're going to talk a lot of Dolphins football together. So that is text Dolphins to 305-419-3924 to sign up for Subtext. Let's talk some ball. Bergeron versus those tackles. I just named the 8 tackles I've done thus far. I have him as my 3rd tackle specifically for the Dolphins. That's the bad news, right? The good news is I fell in love with watching this dude's tape. I think he is an upgrade, and the same concern that I had with Blake Freeland is I don't know that he's an upgrade in 2023 for the team. Bergeron is definitively, in my mind, an upgrade for the Dolphins. That's the good news. And he could play either spot. That's great news. The bad news is, coming out of the film study, I am nowhere near as confident this dude's actually going to be the board pick 50, let alone pick 51. You're going to have to hope that the lack of elite athleticism is enough to create some lukewarm temperature for Matthew Bergeron. Now, case in point, I will say this. Liam Eichenberg's an interesting case study because Liam Eichenberg, was not a booming size player. He wasn't quite as big as what Matthew Bergeron. He came in through the combine at 306, but he was anywhere from a 30th to 80th percentile athlete in number of tests, good athletic testing. But he was below average in size, and his arm length was short, 5th percentile for arm length, 24th percentile for weight, and he fell to the 2nd round. Our NFL team's going to say, well, he's about 50th percentile for arm length. He's below average height. We think he might be a guard. Is all of that enough to add up and see this guy get outside the top 40 picks? As I graded him, he graded out higher than Peter Skoronski and Broderick Jones, who are 2 tackles for me, specifically for the Dolphin system. I think that's important. Those 2 tackles are probably going to go in the top 20, top 25. Skoronski and Bergeron, I actually think, have a number of very similar qualities. And Bergeron edged him out by a half a point for OT3 in this process. Case in point, Bergeron had better lateral mobility. I thought he was more dynamic laterally than Skoronski. I thought Skoronski had higher football IQ. I thought Bergeron had better movement at the point of attack. And I thought Bergeron was marginally better blocking in space. I thought Skoronski anchored a little better, so there's some give and some take there. But it's really interesting that one of these players is discussed as a top 20, top 25 player, and the other one is, he'd probably dare 51. I'm not so sure. I would be more confident if you had to ask me who gets drafted first. I'd say Bergeron gets drafted before Anton Harrison, who we did the evaluation on, and he came in about 4.5 points short of what Bergeron graded as on a 100-point scale. For a reference for tight end, it's the difference of where I graded Sam Laporta versus where I graded Tucker Kraft, and there were 3 tight ends that fit in the gap between those 2 grades. So Bergeron, I substantially like better than the guys we've talked about at tackle and then the deep dives in. All 3 of them, Harrison, Wright, and Freeland. I like Bergeron substantially more than all of them. I think he's a significant scheme fit. The question is, where does he stack versus these other guys? And you're hoping the fact that he's penciled by some as a guard. You're hoping the fact that he has some middle tier athletic testing from a traits perspective through the pre-draft process is enough to get him into your stratosphere. This is probably my top option at tackle in the same way that Darnell Washington was my top tight end option. You know you have to trade up for this guy. I don't think there's a very likely chance that you wait till 51 and you see him in your lap. So when I get to the end of the tackles and I put everybody in their buckets, I'm going to say unlikely to be at 51, advocate for a trade up, Matthew Bergeron. Because I know enough about the other tackles that we're considering doing between Jalen Duncan and Anthony Steen and Jordan McFadden, who are three guys we'll finish with. Duncan from Maryland, Steen from Alabama, and McFadden from Clemson. They ain't going to rank in the stratosphere. So as far as I'm concerned, this is the guy at tackle. And that's not breaking news, right? Like Bergeron's been a really popular mock guy for the Dolphins for quite some time, a couple months now. But I wish, after watching the tape, I could sit here and say, this is going to be the guy at 51. Just write it in and we'll rock with it. I don't know he's going to make it to 51. I'd rather have him over a number of the offensive linemen that are projected consistently in the first round in the top 25 picks. Now, not every one of those teams is going to have the criteria that the Dolphins have, and I get that. But even if you put it in a vacuum, if I were back as draft analyst Kyle and not Dolphins draft analyst Kyle, I would have the two Ohio State kids over Bergeron, and I would probably have Broderick Jones, who's going to be more of a gap and a true tackle. I'd have Broderick Jones over Bergeron. Bergeron in a vacuum, not rating for scheme specificity, would probably be my OT4. And for the Dolphins specifically, is my OT3, including the guys that are going to be long gone by the time the Dolphins pick. So it's a mixed bag of news, right? You have an outstanding scheme fit, but he's positional versatile. Do more teams think he's a guard than a tackle? If he is, he's going to be in your strike zone. If they don't, we might be drafting tight end at 51 or another position after all. Make sure you keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins, your team every day. Appreciate you guys checking out the show. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Hit subscribe, follow along. We have an endless slew of these showcases coming over the course of the next 3 weeks or so before the NFL draft, so plan accordingly. Keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins, your team every day. Fins up, make it a great rest of your day. Talk with you all again tomorrow. Peace.